I have a different kind of a story, and since I usually write stories about other people, it's not always the easiest thing to talk about myself, but here goes. Phone rang at 3:46 a.m. on August 16th, 2014. It's never good when the phone rings at that hour of the night. At first I thought maybe somebody was locked out or maybe there had been an accident. But the voice on the other end of the phone was so completely hysterical that it was very hard to understand him. And he was saying, "Corey died, Corey died, Corey's dead." And I didn't understand exactly. And I said, I said, "How do you know he's dead?" He said, "The police." I said, "Well, how did he drown? How did he die?" He said, "He drowned." And I said, "Drowned?" Because Corey, who is Corey Griffin, who is a close friend of my son Luke's from Boston College, who had become a special friend to me, was a great athlete, absolutely charming kid, and he knew how to swim. And I immediately thought of the beach, and I thought, how could he possibly have drowned? But Corey had not gone to the beach. He had gone to Straight Wharf, and he had gone to participate in a traditional Nantucket end of summer ritual, which is to jump off the roof of the old Juice Guys building into the channel where the fast ferry comes in. And when he didn't come back up, the screams of the kids who were with him attracted a nearby bouncer who was a lifeguard, who dove in and miraculously located the body at the bottom of the water and brought it up from this dark, inky black water. But when they brought it up, it was too late. And he was only 27 years old. So those early morning hours for me were very bleak, because the phone call came to say that I had to go tell Luke to turn on his phone. It was turned off so he could find out what had happened. So I just thought, I can't believe this, because Corey is the only person who went out after dinner. And he told me that he had to go find a date to bring to the Tim Russert Summer Groove at the Boys and Girls Club the following night. And I thought in my head, well, now I'm going to have to tell those people we're not going to be dancing tonight. And as I walked down towards Luke's room, I realized that he and I had been through this before, of course, when his father died very suddenly in 2008. And nevertheless, I just didn't want to blurt it out, because I wanted to give him a chance to understand what had happened. So when I rehearsed a few lines to myself as I knocked on the door, and I said, "Luke, something very serious has happened. Corey was in a terrible accident. He drowned. You need to call Mike." I felt so numb after I said those words, and I thought to myself, I just want to go back to bed and put the covers over my head and pretend like these last few minutes haven't happened. Because Corey was just always the life of the party. And just a few hours before dinner, he was regaling everybody with stories. And I had just interviewed Taylor Swift, and he said to me, "Mrs. Orth, you remember, I was supposed to drive you to that interview." So, and that was going to be payback, because Corey had done such an incredible favor for me. Now, I'm a professional observer, and so when I get an assignment for a big new article, the number one thing I have to figure out is, how do I get into the story? What will lead me there? Who will lead me there? How will I make it happen? This time, the National Geographic called me out of the blue and asked me if I would go all over the world to do a story on the Virgin Mary as the most powerful woman in the world. So Corey was staying with us over Memorial Day weekend, and I told him about my new assignment, and he goes, "Oh my," he goes, "Mrs. Orth, you've got to go to Medjugorje in Bosnia." I said, "Where's that?" "Bosnia-Herzegovina. My father brought a man there who was dying of liver cancer, and he got a miracle cure. It's where the Virgin Mary appeared to these kids in 1981. I said, "Really?" So he began to tell me the story about this hockey dad, Artie Boyle, father of 12, who had only a few weeks to live from liver cancer. And they brought him over to this place. They ran into one of the women who was said to have the Virgin originally appeared to. She prayed over Artie Boyle with Rob Griffin, Corey's dad, putting his hand on his back. And Artie sweated so much that it actually made Rob Griffin's shirt wet too. And when he came back, they found out that his cancer had been cured. So I went immediately to the South Shore of Boston, in Situate where they live, in Hingham, and interviewed both Rob and Artie Boyle, and they promised me that I could go to Medjugorje with them in the fall when they were next going to take their men's prayer group over there. So then I selfishly thought to myself, well, I wonder if that's still going to happen. So at 4:30 a.m., the police came pounding on the door to tell us what we already knew. We weren't family, so they weren't going to tell us very much more information. And I called Rob Griffin, Corey's dad, and he had already heard the news, but I told him I think that what I had heard was that Corey had done a flip off the roof. He said he wasn't even supposed to be jumping. He had concussions from hockey. What I didn't know at the time was that Corey had called his dad earlier in the evening to tell him it had been the happiest day of his life, because he had raised $100,000 to the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge on that day. Anyway, I thought, I really felt kind of numb, and I didn't really know what would happen. But the funeral was amazing, and that's where a sudden kind of transformation started to take place. There were thousands of people. Every beautiful young person that maybe was from Boston, South Shore to Nantucket seemed to have showed up at that funeral. It took us 3 hours to wait in line to go through to view the body. At the funeral, we threw white roses onto the top of the casket before it went into the ground. I remember hugging his mother and throwing the roses. And flowers have always had a special meaning for me because of their beauty, and also because they represent to me the beauty of creation and the wonder of nature. So when we were driving back we were driving back to catch the ferry to come back to Nantucket, we were mostly sad and thinking about the day and everything. And then all of a sudden, Luke turned to me and he said, "Mom," he said, "you know that piece of our property that's all overgrown on the side? Why don't we turn that into a sanctuary garden in Corey's memory?" I said, "Sure, let's do that." And I had no idea how I would do it. And then that fall, I went off to start my journey about the Virgin Mary. And I asked a Nantucket stone designer to think of something. And in the spring, I got of 2015, I got a drawing of a very sterile cement circle. And I politely said, "No, thank you," because I wanted something more spiritual and more rustic. So I didn't really know how it was all going to happen, but I started to try to gather a team of people, because it was an interesting parallel, because as I was going around the world doing the Virgin Mary and watching people who were deeply affected by her and by their faith and everything, my own spirituality began to deepen, and I wanted to find a certain group of people I could make the garden with. And so my own group of angels started to come together to make the garden, and they're here today. So, first, Maribel. Maribel is my housekeeper from Salvador, and she is the most gentle, lovely person, and she has the most unbelievable green thumb. And she went all over the property and found plants that were growing in the weeds and that she put together. And then she has a boyfriend named Dino. Oh, sorry, Maribel. She has a boyfriend named Dino. The poor guy, she drives him like a slave to clear the land. And so every time Dino would come down for a weekend, they would be clearing branches and vines and grasses, and the space just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then I thought, I need a spiritual advisor. and I find Beverly Hall. Beverly is a photographer. Beverly has one of the most beautiful gardens on the island in Mattakit, and Beverly is a deacon of the Episcopalian Church. And so Beverly was the perfect person to help me plan what to do. And then of course we needed the quote, real designer landscaper. And that is Julie Wood, Heather Krieg, also extremely talented, extremely gentle and sweet, and great taste. And also has this special bonus of these beautiful young local Nantucket girls who are her all-female crew who do the gardens with her in the summer. So that was my team. And then we had to gather all this stuff. We brought up we seeded the lawn last fall, and then we had boulders that we had to move from the property and from off the property. And then we filled up a truck filled with some stone benches and teak benches and stuff I had in Washington from my garden, and a 500-pound granite tabletop. And Dino and Maribel drove that up. So gradually the garden started coming together, and I was really moved to tears almost one day because I realized that the young woman who was patting the moss down right under the Russian olives, right near the statue of St. Francis that Tim used to touch in the morning before he would go to work, that she was Phoebe Pohl, and her parents had been the architects who designed my house. So I suddenly realized that there were two generations of the same family who worked on the property, and that to me represented the continuity of life. And I really thought that that's also one of the things that I wanted the garden to represent. So last spring, when I was traveling in Colombia, I found this Spanish colonial cross, this antique cross that I packed in a duffel bag, and I thought, yes, we can have the cross for special occasions. Then Beverly gave me a special small stone cross that she had rescued from St. John the Divine Episcopal Cathedral in New York. And, and she also gave me another wonderful Celtic cross that's on our altar table now. And then her greatest find were the columns from Dennis Kozlowski's garden that he had to sell in a fire sale on his way to jail. So I like to think they're standing there in atonement. But honestly, from the beginning, the garden has really been this source of joy and wonder, and the collaboration of the team to put it together, which is, great. And I was very moved the other day because when Suzanne Wright died, who was a dear friend, and she was the founder of Autism Speaks, I realized that the garden could be in her memory too. And I wanted the garden really to be a place of creativity, a place of sharing, a place of community and gratitude, and a place where people could come together to pray or to meditate or to have the arts, poetry, music, whatever. So I was very, very gratified when I went to the funeral of Suzanne last week in St. Patrick's in New York, St. Patrick's Cathedral, that Bob Wright got up and said in his eulogy that he wanted to devote his energies from now on to trying to find a cure for pancreatic cancer, the cancer that killed Suzanne. And I thought how wonderful that was, because we don't know God's mystery, why he takes people or why people are taken from us at a time that appears to be untimely before their time. But when I heard that, and then I thought about Corey's family have already started this major children's charities in his name, and he's got all these young people that are creating a model of philanthropy for people their age. And I was thinking in my own case, the freedom I was given in a tragic way to throw my passion into my schools in Colombia and do the work that I could do down there. So I think that the garden is a symbol of a way to transform grief, and to transform grief into healing. And I believe that that's what I want the garden to stand for, and it is a way for people to transform their grief and to go from darkness to light. Thank you.